Hello and welcome to another Quaranstream, my weekly streaming series, I guess these days, while we are all practicing appropriate social distancing. Looking at you. My name is AskJoeMagician, and today we'll be talking about, not really a character or a house, like I did in the previous weeks where I talked about the Danes and Euron Greyjoy and Brienne. Instead, I know this is a little bit of a shock, but I actually released a video. Last week, and I'll be answering questions about it and chatting today with all of you this fine afternoon. The video in question was called The True Value of Arya's Iron Coin. I'll put links in the description and everything, and they should be some up here if you're watching back. And in that video, I explore what is apparently some kind of worthless iron coin that Jack and Hagar gave Arya, and what is the true value of that coin. Hang on, I'm gonna fix the camera real fast. Okay, that looks better. Hey guys, how's it going? Seeing in the chat, Warren Dudson, Carl Karsnark, Andrew K, Aaron M, Aegon the Third Targaryen, the Dragon's Bane is here. Wow. Maester Mary, she has opinions about this. Lady Dillsdale, OTDA, Danny McKay. Hey guys, how's it going? Thanks for stopping by for another Saturday afternoon stream. You guys can actually see my awesome shirt now. My Space Cowboy Bebop shirt. And got the plants. And I brought back Ghost. Ghost is actually in frame now. And this little knife here thing, this is actually important today. So a brief summary of what's in the video, if you missed it, is that I think the coin was not actually like a token for a trip or some kind of Braavosi only money or like anything along those lines. Rather, it serves as the Faceless Men's ID card, their identity when they basically don't have one anymore. And because of their history with Braavos, presenting the coin and saying the password compels anyone from Braavos to aid the bearer of the coin, which is essentially what we see happen. Arya walks up, presents it, says Valar Morghulis. The captain of the Titan's daughter says Valar to hire us back, and she gets her trip. And this kind of works because, as we know, during the shifting identity of the Faceless Men, you can't really know what they look like from day to day. So how do you know when you're dealing with a Faceless Man? Well, little iron coin essentially fills the role for that. And it's confusing for Arya because Jaqen doesn't explain what's happening, but everyone else is seemingly on the same page, basically saying, oh, okay, so this means she's a Faceless Man. All right, I guess we're taking her to Braavos. Some more people showing up. Nessie's here. Hey, how's it going? Jade Dead Redhead. Oh, yes, the ship girl. That's right. Yes, that is how I remember who that is. The one that posts the awesome pictures of the old ships. I am very good at memory. Before we get into the rest of the questions, I have a whole bunch. I took them from Reddit and the video, my patron Slack, Patreon, Twitter, that kind of thing. Just wanted to take a moment to tell you all the different places you can find my content these days. Figure get it out of the way at the beginning rather than like in the middle at the end when nobody's watching anymore. Obviously, here on my YouTube channel, make sure you subscribe, share, slam that like button, or if you're listening back on my podcast feed, you can find it at the Wit and Wisdom of Joe Magician on iTunes, Podbean, Spotify, etc., etc., etc. Also, if you're on YouTube, there's a little bell button down there. Make sure you hit the bell icon, and it will allow YouTube to send you push notifications when content from me goes live. Also, you may not have noticed, but I recently renamed my blog from theclankingdragon.wordpress.com, which was a cool name at the time, but didn't really work with the rest of what I'm doing. So now it's JoeMagician.wordpress.com. All the links and posts that I put up get posted there, along with sometimes full text of the theories if I don't put them on Reddit. I'm going to be putting some more blogging kind of stuff up there in the future. And on social media, you can find me at the Joe Magician on Twitter, and on Instagram. I'll probably change this one too, because it was initially named as a joke. It's on Instagram. It's at Matt Wrote This. Anyone that's been following those has been seeing me spamming it with my garden in progress and my seedlings. And of course, finally, patreon.com/JoeMagician, we can get access to exclusive patron videos and podcasts, the artworks and thumbnails from all my videos, especially when Sanri makes them, not the kind of janky Photoshop ones I make. And you can listen and watch the content before anyone else, depending on your patron level. And you can get access to the patron-only Slack, which is a lot of the people that you see in the chat today. A lot of them are over there. And basically this kind of, these stream chats basically just go on all the time if you get access to that. Oh. And there's another thing. I've been sort of teasing it out that I was going to start doing gaming streams, and I think I've got an idea for it. I'm not sure on the day, maybe Wednesdays. I was going to start streaming Crusader Kings 2. I don't know if you guys saw it last night. I put up a thread saying I was ending the game I was playing with the Starks because my mods were broken. So I fixed the mods. Probably going to do a new one. Wednesday nights probably. I'm thinking about playing as the Danes. Keep the Dane love going from the stream with Chloe a couple weeks back. So, with all that stuff out of the way, let's actually, get into the old content. Grabbed a bunch of questions and comments, because there was actually quite a lot of them, and they were pretty good. So let's start off with let's grab this one from Ingo Schwartz. I think this was from YouTube. They said, "Thanks. That definitely made me understand much better what happened to Arya here, but it raises another question. If it is that important to him, how can Jaqen possibly give it away? Can he ever replace it, and how? If not, even if it means losing the rest of his already mostly non-existent personality, it might still be worth giving it away from his perspective, but still, seems like kind of a dire situation. Wouldn't giving it away to him seem extremely distressing?" Yes, this was a really good comment that a few people brought up, where they were like, okay, so Matt, you're proposing that these coins are basically everything to the Faceless Men. It's this is their identity, this is their whole personality. Giving it to Arya, doesn't that essentially remove all that? Wouldn't that be extremely troubling for him as a person? And the answer is yes, it would be. How can he give it away to Arya? I think one explanation for that is that he views Arya very, very highly, and that it would be worth temporarily giving up this coin to her in order to get her to Bravos to be trained, even if it means that it inconveniences him or hurts him from a kind of an internal way, where but on the same level, I mean, they do practice being no one. It's kind of like Arya and Needle, where you're trying to go away from having that crutch. You're trying to go away from being who you used to be and moving towards being this new person, or this lack of personhood, basically. So in some way, you can almost see it as kind of like a what's the right word for this? Maybe like an extended practice for him, where he gives up the one thing that anchors him to it. Or actually, I keep saying Jaqen's a him. We don't actually know what gender he is. He's a Faceless Man, kind of how it goes. He could be anything, although he's a man the 2 times we see him. So it could be something like that, where it's like an exercise for him and extending his being okay with not being who he used to be, giving up the iron coin, kind of like I don't know if you guys have ever seen those clips on YouTube. I think there was a Netflix series about a guy that free climbs incredible mountains and cliff faces. It could be something along those lines, where most of the time the Faceless Men operate with the coin in their pocket, knowing it's basically their safety net. You know, if things go really, really, really bad, well, at least they can, like, find somebody from Bravos, give him the coin, and then be sheltered. This would be like him giving away the coin is the free climb version of being himself. He has given away the one thing that is really, really important and keeps him safe. So that could be one way you could understand it. I also really like thinking, this is one of those hard questions about Arya and the Faceless Men and Jaqen, and it's why her? What is she offering to the Faceless Men that makes her so important? It's actually, the show makes it way more distinct, that it is, there's only like 2 or 3 Faceless Men we even see in the House of Black and White, with a bunch of with a bunch of servants. So Arya being the third one in really highlights that she's very, very important. In the book version, obviously, we see more of them. There's like a fat man, there's a lordling, there's a guy who can put pox on his face. They have a whole little council while Arya's serving them drinks. But the real question is, what's so special about her? It's there have been different theories over time. There's been high fantasy ones that because Arya is actually a skin changer, that she would be incredibly valuable for the Faceless Men. Her ability to use animals, and her ability to maybe they don't know how strong she is. Maybe they think she can get into Greensight, which, as we know from characters like Bloodraven, was hugely, hugely, hugely important to his success as the spy master. Where Bloodraven, in many ways, acted very similar to Jaqen H'ghar, especially when we see him in the Duncan Egg novellas, where he is wearing a disguise. He presents himself as Maynard Plum, using a glamour to disguise his identity, but essentially doing the same things we see from Jaqen. False identity, investigating plots. Although we know what Bloodraven was doing, we don't really know what the Faceless Men are doing, but somebody skilled in magic would be very helpful for the Faceless Men. Let's see what's going on in the chat. Aaron M says, I feel like Jaqen is also more capable of getting himself back to Bravos without the coin, but he sees Arya as more vulnerable. That's one of the explanations I came up with, that Jaqen seems to be like the superstar of the Faceless Men. When we see the other members of the Faceless Men, their ability to change their identities are closer to actors, where it's like putting on false noses, putting on fake pox, maybe dyeing their hair or putting on wigs. But Jaqen has the ability to actually straight up change his identity in a second to another person. Like, it's far beyond what the rest of the Order seems to do. And he's also not at the House of Black and White. He's being trusted on his own to be in Westeros, apparently with a job from Euron Greyjoy, at least one. It's assumed that he's the Faceless Man that threw Balon Greyjoy off the bridge in the Winds of Winter chapter, which I talked about with Poor Quentin a couple weeks ago. With the Forsaken, Euron just says yes, he actually did do that. He was behind the Balon's death using a Faceless Man. So it seems like for him, giving this away is way less of a problem. His magical abilities and his abilities to fit in, and I mean, he becomes a Lannister guardsman in like a matter of days. That's kind of hard to do. So if he wanted to, he could probably get back to Bravos much, much, much easier than anyone else could. Whereas I think if the other Faceless Men gave up their coins, it would be a much bigger deal for them. Oh, interesting comment here from Warren Dudson. He says, if Jaqen is the superstar of the Faceless Men, would his coin be treated differently or respected more at the House of Black and White? This is a good question. We only see the one. We see the one that Jaqen gives to Arya Stark. Presumably the rest of the Faceless Men have them too, but I don't think we see them. There is an underground room where they have essentially a huge cache of coins and clothes and props and that kind of stuff, but not specifically the same iron faceless coin that we see Jaqen given to Arya. Although I think there is a similar one we see in an unusual place. I think Penny, the dwarf pig riding entertainer that Tyrion meets in A Dance with Dragons. She says that I think she has a coin that the Sea Lord of Braavos gave her, and that she also says it's basically like a coin of great value, that it was a gift for her and her brother for making him laugh or something like that. And this actually could work the same way. If you think about the coin in terms of whoever holds it and uses the password would then be treated as a Faceless Man. Well, if the Sea Lord of Braavos gave one out, then that would be an extremely valuable gift to give to somebody like Penny, because it would essentially be the same thing we see with Arya. Whenever she gets in trouble, she could present it to somebody from Braavos and they would treat her like a Faceless Man. That would be pretty incredible. A great gift. So there may be more of these things out there. Like perhaps the Sea Lord of Braavos may have some, or at least one or something like that. The Iron Bank may have some, because this is sort of a thing that came up in some of the comments and questions where people were saying like, well, how many of these things are there? How can they actually work? But the point of the Faceless Men is that the general public of Braavos doesn't really know that much about them. How many are there? What are their exact powers? Where are they going? What are their goals? How are they interacting with the bigger political elements of Braavos? They don't really know. They just sort of know that person has the coin, has the password, they're a Faceless Man. Whatever they look like, however they're acting, that's what it means. So, yeah. Wow, that kind of went off topic from where I started, but it's really interesting to think about how this would work, especially for the common people of Braavos. How do they view the Faceless Men? How do they understand what they can do? It may be something along the lines of where they're sort of like the bogeymen, where they're aware they exist, they're aware that they have some powers, maybe like the relationship between the First Men and the Children of the Forest, where there is a reality to their powers, there is a limit to what they can do, but as far as most adherents to the old gods know, they don't quite understand what their powers are, how far they can go. And they sort of keep it that way. It's sort of on purpose. It keeps them mysterious and powerful, but in the minds of the people that they interact with. Hey, Jonas Jensen, just popping in. This has been going for about 20 minutes. Didn't miss much. Grab another. Oh, One-Eyed Crow asked a question that I'll get to later. So what was Jaqen up to when we first met him in the books? I'll get to that a little bit further down. It's a really good question. One that me and Gray Area have argued about in DMs and on Twitter many, many times. She doesn't like my idea. I don't like hers. That's how it goes. Let's see here. So one from Fred Versteeg. This is again on YouTube. It says, interesting, might these coins have to do with the magic that makes them change not only their faces, but their whole appearance? And what is the resemblance to Melisandre's red ruby? So, for those of you who don't remember, from A Dance with Dragons, Mance Rayder is disguised as Rattleshirt. And it is done with a red ruby that Melisandre gives him, and it's implied sort of confirm in the show that the ruby that Melisandre wears on the choker on her neck is part of her glamour. That, similar to Bloodraven, which we see from Dunk and Egg, where there's this sort of idea that George likes playing with, that crystalline structures have the ability to hold and project magic out, or some kind of psychic powers. If you've ever read Night Flyers, this was the basis of my video. The power of the Night's King with the Whisper Jewels. That's what he calls them, that in the Thousand Worlds universe. I don't think he has a specific name for them in A Song of Ice and Fire, but the idea is the same. That magic crystals and rocks in some way can hold magic in a way that other things struggle to. Like they're somehow better at it. Glass candles are a similar idea. The obsidian daggers that the Children of the Forest use to kill White Walkers. All the same concept. So, are these iron coins in some way like that? Is this iron coin the thing that allows Jaqen to be as successful as he is with his changing of faces? Because if you remember from the video, and also from the books, Jaqen essentially does one of these. He goes, turns around, and his face is completely changed. It's much more drastic in the books. Like his teeth even change. Everything about him is transformed in a second. So how is he doing this? Well, a lot of people have questioned if it's a glamour of some kind. Just to briefly explain glamours, they're sort of illusions, like an illusion magic, where the person to everyone else appears totally differently, unless you start looking at them closely. For instance, in the Tales of Dunk and Egg, Dunk sees Maynard Plum, and he almost sees Bloodraven a few times, where the magic is kind of sort of slipping away, or Dunk is... It's kind of unclear why Dunk is able to when nobody else can. It may have something to do with magical abilities or blood, or who knows. But the important thing is that they don't stand up to scrutiny. A lot of characters have noticed that there's something weird about Melisandre's appearance beyond the fact that she is otherworldly beautiful. They literally think that there's something false about her appearance, that she seems almost like a character somebody drew, like a painting come to life. And that is very true for what we actually know about Melisandre. She's something like 150, 200 years old, an old woman masquerading as a younger one, which is but hers is so much stronger because most of the time when people get closer to these illusions and maybe touch them, they start to fade away. But Melisandre is, well, she's banging the Stannis Baratheon, and he never notices that her glamour falls, so it's extremely powerful. Jaqen as well, he does touch other characters. People get in close contact with them. It never seems to fade. And we see in A Dance with Dragons and A Feast for Crows, as well as later in the show, that the Faceless Men actually do have these faces that they cut off from people, and they wear them, and somehow there's some sort of magical element. I think there's some kind of blood magic involved, but essentially they put on the person's face and then they become them. Arya becomes the little girl, the ugly little girl in one of her chapters. And Uncle Joe said the same thing. As far as she's concerned, she doesn't even feel everything, but everyone else is telling her that she looks like this girl that she is not. So does the coin in some way enhance this? To get back to Fred's question, it doesn't seem like it. Arya does not have the iron coin anymore when she's wearing it. When she's wearing the face. Jaqen is able to swap his appearance after giving it away. Maybe the proximity is something like that. But it seems like the Faceless Men are operating on some sort of different magical plane, where Melisandre and Bloodraven are using this sort of gem-based glamour magic. The Faceless Men are doing something else. I've actually been trying to read for quite some time George's other works to see if there's anything sort of like that, where a person puts on an object and they become them. And the closest is actually his story, The Skin Trade, which is actually a really good story. It's sort of like what's its name? Jim Butcher's series, I'm forgetting the name right now. The one about the wizard detective. George wrote his own version of that, which was basically the Skin Trade. And in the Skin Trade, as well as one of his older fantasy stories, I think it's in the Lost Lands, he has this idea where characters can like cut the pelts off of werewolves. Dresden Files, thank you. Dresden Files, where you can cut the skin or the pelt off a werewolf, put it on, and then you become that thing. That's the closest analog I've seen George write about for the Faceless Men, that there's at least a similar concept where you're cutting off a part from another being, putting on yourself using some magic, and you become that person for a little bit. Oh yes, everyone said Dresden Files at the same time. Thank you guys. Yeah, that was a big fail on my part. I couldn't remember Dresden Files. So I would say the coin probably doesn't have much to do with it. I think it is just a identity sort of thing, that the value of it is sentimental and practical and not inherently magical. Although there is something that people have brought up in the comments on Reddit and on YouTube when they were talking about the connection between the idea of having an iron coin and the others. We've heard before in A Song of Ice and Fire that the others abhor iron. They really, really, really hate it. It's sort of been the explanation for why the Starks of Winterfell put iron swords across the tombs of their dead, that it's some sort of protection measure, to maybe some sort of long-term, like a phobia, or just following some story that you put iron keeps them away. So is the choice of an iron coin in some way related to the others? And this is one of the really interesting parts of the Faceless Men, is when they start interacting with Westeros, and specifically the magical elements. Like there's an old post of mine that I'm going to be adapting into a video, because apparently people really like the iron coin one, which was a really small sort of just explanation thing, but I have a lot of other parts of the Faceless Man I'm going to cover. But for instance, the kindly man, the Faceless Man that teaches Arya, very much looks like Bloodraven when he drops his appearance from the old kindly man to the skull with the worm coming out the eye. There's also the weirwood and ebony doors on the House of Black and White. They actually have a weirwood face in their temple, along with all the other gods, and there's weird connections between them. So the choice of iron, and it's not just for the Faceless Men. For instance, the Iron Bank. George may have some conceptions about iron being the opposite, or some sort of barrier against magical abilities. I think other people have written about this. I know Maester Mary, who is in the chat, has written about how exactly does Bravo shield itself from glass candles and the Valyrian Dragon Lords. It's a really interesting question, because nothing really seems to stop them otherwise, but for somehow Braavos in this weird little island is able to. I mean, this series of islands in the far north, maybe they just couldn't find them on their dragons, but it's an open question. Is there some sort of anti-magic going on with the Faceless Men, with the Iron Bank, with the Braavosi in general, that works against these higher fantasy elements? Anders Graham in the chat says, isn't iron just a symbol of strength, like what Don Noy says about Stannis? That is one way that it is talked about, that There's iron, steel, and copper, referring to the three Baratheon brothers. It's unclear. Oh yes, Marika Ave and Aaron M are both talking about how in a lot of old stories about the Fae, which are sort of magical creatures from Celtic legend, they hate iron, it keeps them away. Could be something along those lines, that the choice of the iron coin is more symbolic as anti-magic than being practical. Although it's weird because the Faceless Men do use magic. So I think I answered that one pretty well about the connections between Melisandre and the Faceless Men. It's a similar effect, but with a different base to it. Oh, looks like we have 112 people right now. Thank you guys all for coming out. It's really good to see you on these Saturdays while we're all stuck inside. A little something to do. Slam that like button, share it, etc., etc. Next question that I pulled from YouTube was Warrior Girl 113. This is more of a general question. Do you believe that Arya's story will be the same in the books as the show? This is a big question. It's really hard to say. George has sort of said when he was asked these questions around season 8 that a lot of the characters will end up sort of in the same place, but their path there will be different. But the secondary characters, the ones who are left out, will be, or their roles will reduce, will be hugely different. Arya is arguably one of the main characters, so would this in some way tell us about where she's going? Well, the biggest problem with this is that in the show, they made up the character of the Night King. The Night King is not in the books as far as we know. There's the historical Night King, the Night's Watch commander who gave up betrayed his command to chase the Night Queen, who seems to be the only female other we've ever seen, and then declared himself King of Night, and there's some weirdness around it, but the actual character of the Night King, the one we see from the show, the other with the pointy crown coming out of his head, has so far not showed up. So if that guy doesn't exist, if there isn't a one person you can stab with a dagger, then how can Arya's story be the same? Actually, speaking of that, yay, a gift. Maester Mary's new podcast partner, Clint of the Laughing Tree on Twitter, gave me a obsidian dagger. Not a real one. It's plastic. I also broke the tip off. Sorry, Clint. Pretty cool, though. So if that character doesn't... Okay, so that's what's going to fall. That's how that goes. So if that's how can the story be the same if the character doesn't exist? It's an open question, though, of why George is forcing Arya to go through this assassin training if there's going to be no one for her to kill. It's the same question you have kind of with Bran Stark, where what is the point of all this training? What is the point of him learning from Bloodraven, seeing all these things? Well, it's going to have to come up somehow, right? He's not going to put his characters through all this for nothing. And in the show we saw, well, yes, that did end up happening, where Bran becomes king by using his weirwood powers in order to manipulate the situation for himself. So there should be something similar for Arya, right? Sort of the Faceless Men's aversion to Valyrians is also interesting to me. The story we get from the kindly man in the House of Black and White is basically that the creation of Braavos and the formation of their order was in direct response to Valyrians and their magic. That their practice of slavery and using blood magic and their dragons to oppress is why they came from nowhere. Why they rose up from the slave mines and actually take credit for blowing up Valyria. Well, it's implied by the kindly man that's what happened. I said something about this, I forget, maybe it was in Deep Geek's chat, God, his name is hard to say sometimes. Where I've wondered if in the book version the roles of Jon and Arya are going to be swapped, because Jon's main enemy throughout the book so far has actually not been Dany or the Valyrians in any way. He's sort of been very separate from that, except for his interactions with Maester Aemon. But he really has been positioning against the others. So could it be that Arya is the one that ends up killing Dany or killing her dragons in some sort of continuation of the plot that George wrote in, that the Faceless Men are in direct opposition to the return of Valyrian, the Valyrian Empire and the way they destroyed the world everywhere they touched? It's something that could be there. That, like, why do this? Why train her? Why set her up to be able to fool people if it's not for something? Killing Arya would be, killing Dany would at least make some more sense than Jon doing it. Although, of course, you have the Azor Ahai and Nissa parallels with Jon and Dany. But just because George wrote old myths doesn't mean he's going to do them. Oh, I have a super chat here from Ross Tremblay. $10 Australian dollars. Says, thank you. Thank you very much, Ross. Didn't see a question with it. If you have one, just drop it in the chat. I'll pick it up as I'm going. But yeah, Arya she has her list of people she's going to kill, but you don't need to be a faceless man to kill a lot of these people. Just like, it could just be a normal assassin. George is putting her through to be the next Jaqen. Why do you need somebody like Jaqen? Well, it would be interesting if that was ended up being the end state of Dany and her dragons, but it could also be that maybe there actually is a Night King figure in the books that hasn't showed up yet, or maybe somebody like Euron, if he's trying to Eldritch Apocalypse like poor Quentin thinks. Let's grab something from the chat real fast. Mega Tech PC, how do you think Arya is going to get away from the Faceless Men? I think that's a really good question that the show didn't really know how to answer. The end of Arya's plotline in Bravos was really odd, where she ended up declaring, I'm actually Arya Stark, and they were just like, cool, go get him, Tiger. That doesn't seem to be how it will go down in the books. I think the real question is, what do they want her for? Is there a specific purpose that they think Arya Stark can do for them that nobody else can? Specifically because, as not played up in the show, but very much played up in the books, Arya is not just a skin changer, she's a very powerful skin changer. From Bravo, she can skin change Nymeria in the Riverlands from Bravos in real time. It's extremely powerful. Like, Jon gets separated by Ghost with the wall, and he's basically got nothing. But Arya is going across an entire sea, across most of an island, and seeing through Nymeria's eyes. That is ridiculous. So she's extremely powerful skin changer. But she's also, much like Bran, she has the ability to skin change multiple animals. She has moved on from Nymeria. She can actually see through the eyes of a cat that she uses to spy for her, which makes you think of, like I talked about earlier, sort of a Blood Raven style of spy master, operator, killer, where Jaqen has not showed the ability to skin change. Arya could very well be the most powerful faceless man they've ever had. So Ned Johnson says the wall may block Jon's working power. Yes, that is also true, that the wall stands between them. There's been some sort of nebulous idea that maybe the skin changing can't go through the wall, but it's important that Arya is extraordinarily powerful and they're training her to be able to change her appearance and kill everything. So it's kind of answering question of what they want her for. It is also the answer of how she gets away. Maybe they want her to get away. Maybe they're sending her back to Westeros as almost a rogue agent against the forces of magic that are raising back up in Westeros. Maybe in opposition to the old gods, whose their powers are less oppressive than the Valyrian freehold in terms of like what they can do with it, but their mind control, actually their mind control, their ability to influence dreams, their ability to work from the shadows and control societies is no less destructive to regular people, especially to like maybe the Faceless Men. But there's also Dany's dragons who have showed back up. The Valyrian Empire seems like it might be a thing again, so they may be reacting to the rising of the force of magic and being like, well, we need to get one of those. It's specifically called out by the Kindly Man that when they started, that the Faceless Men had some sort of ability to either resist or go around the Valyrian magic, and that was their hurdle they had to get over. They had to have the ability to defeat high fantasy, well, villains in their minds, the villains of their story. So, and you usually need magic to kill magic, unfortunately. For instance, like a lot of the same concepts are just being used differently by different magical actors in the story. Like R'hllor apparently can raise the undead as well with Beric Dondarrion, but so can the others. They can raise their army of wights. So they're both working with necromancy, but it's sort of, what are they using it for? And the Faceless Men could be planning to use Arya, radicalize her, arm her with magical abilities, and send her back to Westeros to make sure that maybe the Valyrians don't rise again, maybe stop the old gods. Although Bran ends up king as basically a weirwood god, that kind of hurts that idea. It's kind of unclear. Or even if she will get away. Running from the Faceless Men would be interesting. Like, would Jaqen have to go kill her? Would he be sent after her? Would he even want to? Like, a key part of the theory that I put forward is that Jaqen thinks very, very highly of Arya. And he sort of acts apart from the rest of the Faceless Men. He's allowed to be his own entity, basically. His own agent out in the world. So if she can get away, would they even want to stop her? I don't know. It's a very good question that gets to the heart of what they are doing in the story and what they want Arya for. All sorts of theories. I'm not sure myself, but those are my guesses so far, that they're sort of positioning her to be the counterbalance to the rising of magic. Oof. Let's grab another question here. This actually came from Reddit. It was a series of really good comments by this person, but I picked out one that I really liked, and it was from user Cave Lupum, and they were reacting to the glass flower aspect of the theory, talking about the use of almost a physical totem as a part of as an external part of their personality. And they made the great connection that actually made me go, damn it, why didn't I think of that? God damn it. And it was that Arya feels the same way about Needle, that the sword that Jon gave her very early on in a Game of Thrones that she keeps with her throughout her time in Bravos, sort of hidden, functions the exact same way that I'm proposing that the Iron Coin works for Jaqen. That as she goes down this path to being no one, that she's stripping away her personality, she always has Needle in the back of her mind as this external object where she's sort of putting her soul into it. Where when she touches it and when she thinks about it, the no one fades away, and Arya Stark, daughter of Ned, sister to Jon, comes roaring back into her personality. And they actually grabbed a really good quote on that. It said, "No one," she would answer. She had been Arya of House Stark, Arya Underfoot, Arya Horseface. She had been Arya and Weasel too, and Squab and Salty, Nan the Cupbearer, a grey mouse, a sheep, the ghost of Harrenhal. But not for true, not in her heart of hearts. In there she was Arya of Winterfell, the daughter of Lord Eddard Stark and Lady Catelyn. In there she was someone. But that was not the answer the kindly man wanted." And yeah, it's the exact parallel for what I was talking about. Very unhappy I didn't think of it when I was writing it. So obvious, but so well put here. That these things, these physical objects, reminding her who she is and bringing her back to Arya, to being a Stark, to being from Winterfell, exactly the same idea. That it actually made me question the Iron Coin thing. If it's for all the Faceless Men, do they all have these things, or is it Jaqen's? Does that coin mean something to him in particular? Much like in the glass flower for Cyrene of Ash, or Kyrene. I bet George has some weird way of saying that. Where the glass flower is hyper personal to her. It was a gift from a boy on her home planet of Ash, that long after the boy has probably died and she's probably forgotten everything about him, she still holds on to this thing to anchor her back to her personality. So yeah, I think that was a really, really good comment by Cave Lupham, and perfectly demonstrates the idea. And it's something you see elsewhere in the story. For instance, Daemon Blackfire, his last name taking on the name Blackfire, he has put his identity into having the sword Blackfire. It's kind of, you can't really separate them anymore. They are one and the same. But in his heart of hearts, he's still Daemon Waters. Sort of a similar split of personality. Really good. Thanks, Cave Lupham. There's a Reddit thread, and they made a lot of really good points like this. Let's grab something from Courtney Mazza. You heard it here first. The rumor that Matt is Gurm is fake news. There's rumors that I was George R. R. Martin. Do I look like Jeff T? Do I look like Brendan B. Fish? Although we do have a similar love of delaying projects until they are perfect and then releasing them long after they promised. So I guess kind of Gurm-like in that way. Both perfectionists. Oh, hey, Bernie's here. Chrissy of Old Stones, I see she showed up. How's it going, guys? I saw somebody tagged me earlier up. Seth Smith, hi, first time stream chatter. What are your thoughts on Jaqen H'ghar being Syrio Forel after Syrio's disappearance in the books? Could Ned's connection to Bravo's The Faceless Men be deeper than that? Also, welcome to the stream, Seth. Thank you for making it. Hope you're enjoying it. This is one of the primary Jaqen H'ghar Faceless Men questions that comes up. One that was in the show. I hope you guys remember there was that there was a picture of a character in the background of one of the promos, and there was a whole lot of people like outlining and drawing with red arrows saying like, oh my god, it's Syrio, he's alive, he's in Bravos, he made it out. It's one of those theories that just will not die. I think at Con of Thrones I did a panel with Bookshelf Stud, Kim Renfro, and Sam Adolfo, And Sam actually told a story about she's a friend of Miltos, the guy who played Ciro Farrell in the show, and how he's been waiting for the end of the series so he can finally say what he was not allowed to while the show was going on, that Ciro did die after fighting Marin Trant, that he is 100% dead, at least in the show version. But it's one of those things where George writes characters that are very similar, where they are echoes of each other, and people look at them and wonder. It's like, well, if Jack can be anybody, couldn't he be Ciro? You get a similar thing with Rhaegar and Mance Rayder, where some people have suggested Rhaegar's breastplate had a lot of rubies in it, and we know Melisandre uses rubies in order to make glamour. So was the person that died on the Trident not actually Rhaegar, but a fake? That kind of thing. And I think it's just that. I think it's similar characters, echoes of each other, that Ciro and Jaqen are similar because they're doing the same role in the story for Arya. They're serving as mentors, they're serving as teachers, and they're both from Braavos, so there's overlap in their understandings and viewpoints on the world. It would certainly be a twist if Jaqen H'ghar was Ciro Farrell. I don't think he is, though. I think it would actually sort of, in some ways it would be kind of cool if he was, but it would also kind of cheapen what Ciro's death means for Arya, and how he stood up for her, and how when the god of death came for him, how he reacted. If it was actually just a bait and switch, and it was, oh, by the way, Ciro actually lived, he's been Jaqen this whole time, haha. Well, it doesn't really mean a whole lot anymore. It's one of the, it would be a narrative payoff that would be a really cool twist that would destroy a primary part of Arya's journey to where she is now. That, oh no, he's actually not dead. I faked you out. Haha, I am Gurm. It would be like if Ned was still alive. A lot of people like writing these theories that it was actually someone else, or Ned's still alive somewhere else. And it's like, it would be a really cool twist, but it would totally undercut the point of the death. Guilty Undertaker says, if Ciro escaped, then the first sword of Braavos did run and Ciro lied. Yeah, it would also go completely against his character. Everything he's been telling Arya about, you stand and fight, and you do not run, it like destroys it. It would be Ciro living a lie, that everything he told Arya is untrue, that all of his lessons were not worth listening to. Sasuke says, if Ciro lived, we would have seen something happen to Marin Trant, I think, so I've always been convinced he died. Yeah, that's true too. It would also mean that Marin Trant is also he's also let Ciro go without any damage to himself. It doesn't really do a lot. But I do think it is really interesting that Arya's story, even from a Game of Thrones, has been tied to Braavosi characters, that for some reason George has always been pushing her, towards the Braavosi, towards the Faceless Men, that somehow a First Sword and a Faceless Man are integral to her character, that he always wants her going there, he always wants her learning from these characters. And when you think, again, like I pointed out in the video, when you think about the formation of Braavos and what they were created in opposition to, the Valyrians, the dragons, slavery, all these things, that they are the rebels of the free cities, that they function as like a counterbalance to imperialism is interesting in terms of why George is associating with her so strongly. Again, going back to, will Arya be the one to kill Dany or kill the dragons? It could be. There's something there for why he's, like, Jon is so associated with the Night's Watch, and Bran's associated with the Old Gods. All the Starks are taking on different factions from the world, so if you can maybe use their history to extrapolate out what they're sort of doing. Okay. I need another sip of water. With the old How Strong Dunk mug. This was from Reddit, Pirate Robot Ninja of De. I never know how to pronounce this one. It's one of those things on Reddit where you see somebody's name and it's like, I have no idea how to pronounce your name, but I always say it the same in my head. They question, in the video, I take a line where the Faceless Men are going around and essentially saying, I cannot kill this person because I know them. And Pirate Robot Ninja is questioning, is that a real rule? Is it a hard and fast one, or is it one can it be bent? This is sort of like the Prime Directive from Star Trek, where nobody can break the Prime Directive, except for all the times they do. They constantly break the Prime Directive. It's so is this rule the same? And they bring up a lot of good points about how Arya is killing people that she knows, and for personal reasons. She is not acting in accordance with this scene. Like in particular, when she kills Daron, the Night's Watch person that came with Sam and Aemon on the boat, she kills him out of personal kind of rage at seeing a man of the Night's Watch not on the wall thinking about Jon. She also has her list. She has been trying to get revenge on people in particular. It seems the Faceless Men know about her list and are not really discouraging her from doing it. And in the Winds of Winter, members of the Lannister guards of the Lannister regime have showed up in Braavos to negotiate. And I believe that among them is one of the people on Arya's list. And it seems like the Faceless Men in particular are sending her there to do a job, but it's right next to what she's supposed to do is the person she wants to kill personally. And I think, I said it wrong. Aegon the Dragon's Bane says it's Darion, not Daron. Yeah, you're right. So I think that's one of the primary things that is happening with Arya's story in Braavos. It is a larger theme where she struggles with the idea of no one versus Arya, giving up the things she wants in order to be Barrel Rider says Raff the Sweetling. Yes, Raff the Sweetling has showed up in Braavos. Is she no one? Is she Arya Stark? Can she serve a higher power, or will she have her own goals in mind the entire time? And I think it's one of those things that they all must struggle with, because giving up your personality to become a faceless assassin, as we've seen, is really, really hard on the psyche. That how do you stop being yourself? How do you become like a blank person? We sort of see it with Beric Dondarrion, where every time he comes back from the dead, he's less himself, that he's slowly trending towards no one. But that process for him is hugely negative on him, and his like sanity is coming apart. And it's like, to become a faceless man, to become no one, is essentially drives them insane. It drives them to being almost like, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of this, but sometimes you hear stories about like feral children, or children that were massively abused in terms that they were deprived human contact their entire lives, and they're sort of like these weird, almost blank people when they were found. And going towards that is just torturous on a person. So it seems like the sort of goal where they can't really get there, but it's something they're always striving for. And I think it's kind of like the Night's Watch vows, where it's like they say you can't father any children, you can't have any wives, but they still go off to Mole's Town and they don't get killed. I think it's a same sort of thing here, where the Faceless Men know that their members are going to try and get personal vengeance. They are going to try and use their powers for their own, for things that they wanted before they joined the order. It's more about discouraging it and trying to get them to act more towards being no one, rather than like, you broke the rule, you're out of here. Yeah, a guilty Undertaker. Yeah, I was talking about the Prime Directive. I don't pretend to understand Brannigan's law, I merely enforce it. Yeah, it's a similar sort of thing. It's a rule that they break all the time. Oh, and actually a good point from them. Another one, not to mention there are Night's Watch bastards in the story. Craster and Mans, yes, the Night's Watch members do break their vows. They don't always get killed for them. Just like the Faceless Men, I don't think they kill everyone that shows up. Oh, Lady Starfall showed up in the chat. Hey, how's it going? Yeah, sorry you guys. I had set the stream by accident to start now, not in it, but that was a misclick. I meant to have it go live at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, not 2. So I kind of faked a bunch of people out, which is even more impressive that you all showed up at the right time. 131 people right now. Yeah, leave a like, share, do all the things. And if you have any particular questions you want to make sure that I answer, or if you just want to support the channel, super chats are always available, and those sticker things. Not really sure what the sticker things are for, but they look cool. I wish I could do my own stickers. Like, if I could, like, get Sandrixin to make some. Like, kind of like Twitch emotes. That'd be pretty cool. Maybe, at some point. There's actually a really good quote, going back to what I was talking about, from Pirate Robot Ninja. It's a quote from the Kindly Man. These are really worth going back and reading, by the way. What the Kindly Man says to Arya, they're super fascinating. He says, "Death is not the worst thing," the Kindly Man replied. It is his gift to us, an end to want and pain. On the day we are born, the many-faced God sends each of us a dark angel to walk through life beside us. When our sins and our sufferings grow too great to be borne, the angel takes us by the hand that leads us to the nightlands, where the stars burn ever bright. Those who come to drink from the black cup are looking for their angels. If they are afraid, the candles soothe them. When you smell our candles burning, what does it make you think of, my child? And it's a quote and an idea from the Kindly Man, getting at the idea that the primary idea behind the Faceless Men and what they are trying to do, is it actually being no one, or is it serving the many-faced God? And I think those are the primary struggle with members of their order. How do you serve the many-faced God, or versus your earthly attachments, sort of thing. It's actually kind of like they talk about this in Avatar: The Last Airbender, when to become a fully realized avatar, Aang is at certain points told that he has to give up all of his earthly attachments, his love for characters, which we see ends up being sort of not true, because he does end up marrying Katara, spoiler alert, and having kids. So he does have earthly attachments, but it's part of his personality. He ends up splitting. Ion Throne saying we have glass candles, so that's good. As long as the Bravosi aren't blocking them. So here we go. This was another really good comment from Reddit. User was Reddit of unusual size. Another interesting name. what they say is, this is the kind of theory I like. It's dialed down, it sticks tightly to the script, explains some otherwise baffling actions we see in the books in a clear, concise way. Well done and a very persuasive explanation for how the Iron Coin works. That's not part of their question. I just read it because it made me feel good to read. Even better, it offers us a useful null hypothesis going forward. If the Iron Coin is a symbol of the Faceless Men to be presented in extremis to a Bravosi for assistance, it stands to reason that its absence, turning it over to Arya, may well cause problems for the Faceless Men, currently known as Pate, in The Winds of Winter, precisely because it serves not just as a plot device for Arya, but a Chekhov's gun for Jaqen now that he's turned it over to Arya. And this is a really, really good point. So, if having this coin essentially gives you like a get out of jail free card, it opens doors that would normally be closed. Well, it's not just a personal problem that Jaqen has given over his identity to Arya in order to have her go train at the House of Black and White. It means he has taken away from himself the ability to use it. And he's in Old Town now, and things are not looking to be okay there. For instance, many think that Euron is going to continue down from the Shield Islands and end up sacking Old Town, or Eldrick apocalypsing, blowing horns, calling the Old Ones from the deep, burning the city down. Jaqen is now stuck there, and if he only has the one coin and he's giving it to Arya, he might be in a lot of trouble, especially because we saw his Pate impression. It's actually not that good, especially to the people that know Pate, that he does not talk the way that Jaqen is carrying it off. Their disguises work much better when they're anonymous rather than when they're impersonating a specific person, you know what I mean? Where it's better if it's just a random face, but a lot of people that know the person in detail would sort of be like, there's something off about you. You're not acting the same. Are you okay? Sort of similar to the way that Dunk starts seeing through Maynard Plum and seeing Bloodraven. People have brought up before that maybe there's more than one coin. Maybe Jaqen carries two. And Reddit of Unusual Size, I brought this up to them as well, and they had a really good comeback to that, where they said, if the coin is as important as I'm saying, if it really is a manifestation of his identity, of his soul, that it serves for Jaqen the same way that Needle serves for Arya, then it would actually undercut that idea if George gave Jaqen two. That it actually would remove the narrative tension from Jaqen, that it was actually nothing to give her the extra one, that he carries it all the time and says in case he sees an apprentice, that it raises tension and improves whatever George is playing with Old Town, with you in the back of the head knowing that Jaqen might be in real trouble now. Like for instance, if Euron comes raiding to Old Town, it's perhaps if Jaqen gets wind of it, he could always jump on a Bravosi ship and get out of there. If that is no longer available to him, if that is a dramatic tension that George can use, then that would be very impactful for the reader, because we've really never been fearful for Jaqen before, like his personal survival. The closest was when Arya gave him the axe in order to escape when there was a fire around their cage or whatever. That was the closest it's come. Since then, Jaqen's pretty much skating on his on all dangers and kind of going back to being a master assassin. But if he can't be caught, like we see with him in the Black Cells, then could it happen again? What would happen, especially if Euron knows Jaqen is there? If part of the job was not just to kill Balon, but then also go to Old Town, it could be very dangerous to him personally. For instance, is Jaqen there stealing something for the Faceless Men, or is he there stealing something for Euron? If it's for Euron, that would make it much more interesting. Or is Jaqen there? Is he supposed to open the gates for the Ironborn when they show up? I'm not really sure, but I think Reddit of Unusual Size made a really good point that it would make very good practical sense for Jaqen as a character, as a real person, to carry 2 coins, one for Apprentice, one for himself. But it would be worse for storytelling if he actually did that, which makes me think that perhaps he actually only does have the one, and that it was personally very hard for him to give it up for Arya. Courtney Mazza says, isn't he after the books on dragons and Citadel? That is the working theory a lot of people have, that he is stealing the Archmaester Walgraves, I think. He's stealing his key that opens all the doors in the Citadel. It's been hinted at that within the Citadel contains books on dragons. Euron claims that many people have suggested that Euron paid for the death of Balon Greyjoy with a dragon egg. Maybe the Faceless Men are trying to seek books in order to how to hatch them themselves. That would make interesting. That would make for an interesting plot for why he's there. Yes, Nessie in the chat, the Unspun Yarn, here's a new YouTube channel, or she renamed it, The Great Books Heist. Yes, this is the idea that everyone's going to Old Town looking for the knowledge locked away in their vaults. Could be. Could very well be the truth to it. But I do like this tension that's being set up, that Jaqen is in Old Town. He's looking for something. Euron might be on his way as well, and Jaqen is deprived of his primary way of escaping, something like an Ironborn invasion. Guilty Undertaker asks, would Maynard Plum have been as effective a disguise if Dunk were familiar with the real Maynard Plum, assuming he exists? No, I think that's exactly the point. Bloodraven is pretending to be somebody that nobody knows, so his behavior can't be compared to the real version. The glamour he's wearing does start wearing off from Dunk's perspective, but nobody knows there's anything wrong because Maynard Plum is essentially a made-up person, or nobody at White Walls knows the real one, so they don't know anything amiss. Jaqen's actually taking a huge risk pretending to be Pate and trying to live his life. We see him interacting with Marwyn the Mage and Leros and Lazy Leo Tyrell, where he goes up and says, "Hi, I'm Pate, the pig's boy." And as the reader, you sort of go, we just saw Pate interacting. That's not how he acts. So it's one of those things that I really love thinking about in terms of the Faceless Men, where Jaqen is presented as this hyper prepared, amazing assassin, but he's not perfect. He is not able to trick everyone all the time. His Pate impression is pretty bad, especially the people that know him. So I think it is possible that Jaqen might get caught in the Winds of Winter without his coin, and be in a situation where that comes back to bite him, that the sacrifice he gave to Arya ends up being part of maybe his downfall. It's one of those things where, as we get to the Winds of Winter, and if Euron shows up in Old Town, looking for what happens to Pate, that would be really interesting. Ion Tron says, and Alaris is living a double life, so mayhaps more likely to recognize it in Jaqen Pate. Yeah, that's a really good point. Alaris, most people think is Sorella Sand, the daughter of Oberyn, and the Citadel pretending to be this character known as Alaris the Sphinx. That's actually something that I'm going to talk about in a future Faceless Men video for how Jaqen ended up in the Black Cells. I've always noticed that Varys in the books is much more in behavior closer to a Faceless Man than he is in the show. In the show, he's presented as this spy master who just uses the reading of letters and his little birds to kind of fool everyone. But in the books, he's actually a master of disguise himself. He grew up as a mummer or an actor. So Varys would be in a position to recognize somebody that is doing the same thing, like Jaqen H'ghar perhaps, than anyone else. That's something. Look for that in the future video. I'll be expanding on that, but it's the basic idea that you know, game recognizing game sort of thing. Bolton's Landshade, when Marwyn see through the skies, it is a large tension with Marwyn as a character of how much does he know about the people that are serving him. It seems almost comical that Marwyn would not know that Alleras is Sorella. He may recognize immediately that Pate has been replaced by Faceless Man, but not doing anything about it. Especially with his glass candle, so it's kind of an open question of, if Marwyn has noticed these things, why isn't he doing anything about it? Future video right there. Let's grab something from the chat here. Courtney Mazza says, oh, he definitely didn't throw it into the sea, use it to pay for his brother to be tossed. Yeah, exactly. Somehow Euron acquired a dragon egg, and that's how he paid for Balon's murder. Angel Dalton says, do you think Jaqen could possibly be the original Faceless Man? Maybe that's why he has the coin. Yeah, you know, it is a question about Jaqen H'ghar, who this Faceless Man actually is, because his powers are apparently so much stronger than all the rest of them, except for Arya. We do know that characters can survive forever. It'll be not to give away a future video, but Firewhites seem to last almost forever. They stop needing to eat, they stop needing to sleep, they just sort of exist. So could the original Faceless Man still be alive? I mean, it very well could be. Bloodraven is alive long after everyone thought he was dead. The Undying are not alive in the sense we think of it, but they have found ways to cheat death for quite a long time. Stories of characters like the Grey King lasting for almost forever. It is an interesting possibility that Arya is interacting with a living legend. This is something that comes up in other stories, like in particular the Night Angel series, where I don't want to give too many spoilers away, but it is a plot point in that book that characters you think are mythological and dead are actually alive in that series, and it would be really interesting if that is a similar idea that maybe is happening with Jaqen. He is the original Faceless Man, still walking the earth, unable to, forgot who he was, and picking out his next apprentice. That'd be super interesting. Definitely a part of a future video. From Reddit, Wild2098, they say, I like the idea the totem could somehow protect the holder, as say a magical ward like iron might do. Mayhaps that's how glass candle users can't see them. So this actually ties back into Marwyn, like we were talking about a little bit. It's the idea that if iron is abhorrent to magic in some way, Jaqen could now be vulnerable now that he doesn't have it, if it actually works like that, which is kind of a bunch of suppositions built on each other, but also something to think about. If there is a practical point to carrying around these iron coins, if they actually do something, Jaqen not having it no longer prevents that from happening. For instance, the Bravosi, for quite a long time after escaping, were able to hide from the Valyrians and their glass candles. It may mean that Jaqen is now vulnerable, that his disguise as Pate is not going to work. Especially, some people have wondered if Euron has a glass candle, if he is Earthon Nightwalker from Karth, if that's how he is making all this work, that Jaqen H'ghar is or whoever he actually is, if he's the original Faceless Man, whatever. Let's call him Jack and Hagar just for simplicity's sake. If he can now be unmasked, if this is like a glass candle works in terms of like an X-ray detector where the disguises go down and you can see who they actually are, be really interesting. I don't have the link to it, but Maester Mary definitely wrote a really interesting theory a while back talking about how Braavos hides itself from the Valyrians. Everybody, the mods in the chat, if you could grab that and post that. I forget what it's called, but I know it was really good. Oh, Disputed Lands, Amanda showed up. Hey, Amanda, good to see you. Not much Ironborn this time, I'm sorry. We have been talking about Euron, but although I did actually just mention the Grey King, so what do you know, maybe I summoned Amanda with all that. Grab another one from the doc. I believe this was from... I think this was from Reddit, from Vantal. Any idea on how Jaqen ends up in the Black Cells? Why animals like Biter and Roar seem to respect and even listen to his orders? What... oh, excuse me. Drank that water a little bit too fast. Was he the Faceless Man who killed Balon? Whole lot of questions here. I think the Biter and Roarge connection with Jaqen is something I find really interesting, that they've essentially been in the Black Cells with Jaqen the entire time, as far as we know, and also that they were caged up together on their way north to the Wall with Yorn, and why they were even being grouped together. Like, we know Roarge and Biter are kind of a team, that Biter was essentially like, he was a fighter in these like underground blood sport sort of things, kind of like you see in Marine. His teeth are filed down. He was kind of almost used as like a human dogfighting sort of thing, and Roarge was kind of his handler. But how does Jaqen Hagar, the Faceless Man, fit in with these two? Why would they end up together in the Black Cells, especially when we know that in the Black Cells, people are usually separated. Like Ned is isolated. Most of the people in the Black Cells are kept in their own cells, basically. So why are they being grouped together this entire time? And I do have some ideas about this. If not to get too far into it, but if Jaqen needed them for something, if he was doing something in the Red Keep or doing something in King's Landing and perhaps hired them for a job, if they all got caught together, that would make sense. But there's also an interesting part of the Faceless Men in that Jaqen has the ability later on, we see he can swap his face immediately. But it's unclear if he has that ability in the Black Cells. So if he escaped from his cell somehow, then he could instantly maybe take somebody's face and become them. But if you trap him with Roarge and Biter are very unique looking characters. Roarge is missing his nose. Biter essentially looks like a feral dog. So if he tried to escape the Red Keep using their faces, he would stand out, basically. So that's, I guess, one purpose for why they would be joined together in the cells, that it's sort of like, if he was caught and whoever caught him knows he's a Faceless Man, trapping him with people whose faces are not anonymous but instead would stand out, could almost be like a security measure. It could also just be random. As to why they are scared of him, Jaqen is a scary person just sort of in general. Maybe he demonstrated some of his powers. Maybe he beat the crap out of them. Or because the two of them worked together as a pair, maybe they tried to attack Jaqen and he beat them both effortlessly. So now they're afraid of him. That kind of thing. Like a Jaqen, like a prison fight, that kind of thing. What he's doing in the Black Cells is very much one of those things that George, I it's hard to say what's going on there because it's so weird. It's never been explained. Even some of his other mysteries in a Game of Thrones, he has gone on his way to solve for us. Like, he explained the who sent the cat's paw, that it was actually Joffrey. He explained that later. These minor mysteries, normally explains them somehow, even if it's books later in like some sort of detail, but there really hasn't been much put into what Jaqen was doing in the Red Keep, what he was doing in the Black Cells, and what he was doing in Westeros, especially because we know he's been contracted to go kill Balon Greyjoy. So if you have to go kill Balon Greyjoy, then why would you be in the Black Cells? You'd want to be on your way to the Iron Islands in some way, right? Obviously Euron has some sort of time frame because he shows up a day after Balon dies, so it's kind of unclear. I have ideas about perhaps Peter Baelish being involved for what he was doing there, but yeah, it's even just tracking his timeline for what he's doing in Westeros is hard. Because you meet him, he's in the Black Cells, then he's put on this cart going to the Night's Watch. Presumably, maybe he could have escaped at any time, but if he could, he wasn't. He was sitting there for some reason. Then he escapes. Then he becomes a Lannister guardsman for a while. Then after that, you have to suppose he then went to the Iron Islands, killed Balon, but on a specific time frame because, again, Euron shows up a day after Balon dies. So there's some kind of schedule he's following. And then he goes to Old Town, kills Pate, and now he's doing something in the Citadel. Linking those together is a very hard thing to try and do. And if there's some sort of singular idea that's linking them together, especially that with Arya then being thrown into the picture, where he, I guess, goes away from his stated job of going to kill Balon for a little bit to hang around with Arya Stark. It's hard to put together. Amanda says, Speedlands, Gurm has admitted he is not the best with his timelines. Yeah, this may be one of those things where he had an idea to begin with and then changed it a bunch of times, and now you just sort of have to look back out and scratch your head. Young Crone says, there are theories that he was in the Black Cells planning to kill Ned on his way to the Wall. Yeah, it's one of those things where how could Jaqen know ahead of time that Ned was going to be sent to the Wall? Because the plan to send him to the Wall comes up only kind of after the insurrection against Joffrey, sort of, against Cersei and Joffrey. And it was Varys who wanted him to go to the Wall, but Joffrey and Baelish wanted Ned dead. I think a lot of them would have been happier if Ned just went back home. It's also interesting to note that at this time that there are quite a few people trying to kill Robert Baratheon, so maybe he was there trying to kill another king. Helg Gambleby, not watched the Iron Coin video yet, but stoked to be here. Glad you could join us. Video's pretty short, only about 13 minutes long. Welcome, glad to have you here. Edward Martin says, meaning Arya changed his plans. Yep, that seems to be the point, that Arya in some way forced the character we know as Jaqen to maybe delay some things, that he hung around in Harrenhal maybe longer than he would have wanted to, specifically to get to know Arya. Or he knew he had time before he had to go to the Iron Islands and kill Balon. But I don't know, to even plan that out is hard to do in your head. Like, so when did Euron go to the Faceless Men? When did he give them the dragon egg? Then Jaqen then has to get to Westeros, and they have to coordinate on a specific day. Euron having a glass candle makes this a lot easier, or in terms of what he's doing, but he still has to have some idea when Balon's gonna die. I get the feeling that that this is one of those things where, like, at the start of Game of Thrones, Westeros is pretty small, and then as the story grows, it grows by thousands of miles as he decides it's bigger than it was to begin with. I think Jaqen is one of those characters where he's essentially been kind of retconning as he's going, coming up with cooler ideas for what to do with him, and then just sort of going like, yeah, but don't look too hard at what he used to be. You kind of have the similar thing happening with Illyrio and Varys, where if you track their plans from book to book, it gets really hard to be like, wait, what were they doing? He actually makes a joke about it in A Dance with Dragons, where one of the members of the Golden Company, where they're talking about Illyrio, and he says something along the lines of, oh, what is the fat man's plans this time? It changes with like the turn of the moon. George making a joke at himself because he played Illyrio in the pilot for A Game of Thrones. Oh, not Illyrio, but he played a Pentoshi. But talking about Illyrio and probably also himself, that yeah, George often does change ideas for his characters. Like, for instance, Catelyn Stark, when it first started off, was supposed to die beyond the wall to the others, and instead dies in the Riverlands to the Freys and becomes Lady Stoneheart. It's sometimes things just don't make sense when you really think hard about them looking backwards. Yes, Carl Karsnark, I know how to pronounce it. I was just being funny. Or trying to be. I guess the joke didn't come across. Bolton's Lampshade says, is it conceivable the Faceless Men have their own prophecies? Very true. Prophecy is not just isolated to one group of magic users. The Children of the Forest have their own. The Targaryens have their own. The Undying have their own. Euron has his own somehow by taking Shade of the Evening. It's very possible that in a similar way, maybe you could think of the Faceless Men in terms of like someone like Rhaegar, or someone like Melisandre, where they see something shadowy in the future and they're moving towards it, but maybe their interpretation is wrong. Or there's some, you never know, maybe something from the Slave Mines or something they've been holding on to all this time that is influencing what they're doing now, but is kind of unclear. Maybe George has yet to reveal it, or maybe it's hidden in something a kindly man said. He drops a lot of detail in those chapters. Barrel Rider says, it would be ironic that Marwyn didn't see through fake Pate. Sam is likely the one who sees through the truth about Pate and Sorrel because he always feels more comfortable with women as himself, he says. Yeah, it would be actually kind of funny and ironic if, although Marwyn is now gone, he has jumped on a boat, he's on his way to Daenerys, that if Marwyn is so wrapped up with his own bullshit that he does not notice a Sorella Sand, or he does not notice Jaqen H'ghar in his presence, that he's his head is off in his own world, his own magical world, as it often is, just like things that go beyond his notice. Sam is the slayer of Sam the Slayer, maybe a slayer of lies, but he'll see through them. Purple Lord Leo, Anansi, and Carl Karsnark are both sort of alluding to the same thing. How many Faceless Men are there? How many of them are in Westeros at the same time? It's unclear. I think we see less than 10 in the House of Black and White that are actually Faceless Men. If you include Jaqen, it's not that many, and Arya. It's assumed that Jaqen is the only Faceless Man in Westeros at the moment. Doesn't mean it's true. Maybe there's more, but he's definitely the only one we've seen. So saying like, oh, there must be like X amount to be in Westeros at the same time, I don't know. It would just be guesswork. Like, it would make sense from a practical standpoint that the Faceless Men have like have agents in different places, that there are Faceless, like maybe Jaqen is the Westerosi Faceless Man. Perhaps there's a Volantis Faceless Man. Perhaps there's an Ashai Faceless Man. That they all are kind of like from the Bourne movies, that they sort of live their lives until they get instructions and then they are activated and they do stuff. Could be something like that. Who really knows until we see more? We've only really seen the ones in the House of Black and White and Jaqen, so hard to tell. But it's also because Jaqen's abilities are so effective that maybe you don't need more. And especially because we know that their prices are so high. Littlefinger says that it would cost like more to use the Faceless Men to kill Princess or a king or something like that than to hire the armies to overthrow them. So maybe they don't take that many big jobs like that. Although we do see them taking smaller ones throughout Braavos. Hard to say. Oh, Vantal also asked, was he the Faceless Man who killed Balon? Similar idea to what I was just talking about. We haven't seen another Faceless Man in Westeros, so it stands to reason that it was Jaqen who also did it. If you sort of track his path too, it kind of makes sense. If he goes up from King's Landing to Harrenhal, and then going west to the Iron Islands, and then down to Old Town, kind of, you can sort of track him. It's not like he went from King's Landing to Harrenhal, then Skagos, and it's like, okay, well, how would he get from Skagos to the Iron Islands to kill Balon? It's sort of a natural path to get down there. Also, there's shipping lanes between those areas like Seaguard that end up down in Old Town. Tokus 420 says someone was spying on Arya because the kindly man seemed to know Arya killed someone before she fessed up. Yeah, you have to assume that throughout her entire time in Braavos that Arya is under surveillance, either from the people around her, the family she's living with, or just other Faceless Men. Maybe somebody like the waif is just trailing her at all times, because again, they could be anyone. So yeah, it's I'm betting that all of her exploits when she's sent out on her training missions basically are being detailed, and the Faceless Men are using her reports versus what they know actually happened to judge, will she continue her training? What are they going to do next? Is she ready for the next step? Like, they also give her the ritual blinding at one point. It's yeah, it's hard to say, but I would guess that everything she does in Braavos is being watched and notated back to the Faceless Men, especially because, as I noted in my video, the relationship between the General Braavosi and the Faceless Men is pretty tight. Although there is something interesting that happens with when Arya is brought to the House of Black and White, where they don't want her to go through the normal port. They actually put her on a rowboat before they get to before they get inspected by the harbor master. and she gets rowed off to the House of Black and White on her own, implying that while the regular Braavosi, the common people, perhaps have this relationship with the Faceless Men, that maybe the authorities of Braavos are unhappy with having the Faceless Men a part of their culture, or they don't like that the challenge to their power, or just some kind of maybe Braavos is trying to move beyond the Faceless Men, and for that reason they don't want to expose who they consider Jaqen H'ghar to the authorities. That is one thing I really found interesting on rereading these chapters, how when you consider Braavos and in terms of the Iron Bank and the Sea Lord, but there's also the Island of the Gods, where there's the Moon Singers and there's the Cult of Starry Wisdom, and all these other old kind of faded religions all still have power in Braavos, and there's a real jockeying for position between the Sea Lords, between the Iron Bank, between the Faceless Men, and all these other organizations that have sort of come together in one collective, that while the Braavosi people obviously revere the Faceless Men and will help them, perhaps the rest of the Braavosi power structure would not. Maybe they are not big fans, or maybe some of their leaders have been killed in the past by the Faceless Men, and they would take an opportunity to mess with them. Or just extract, like, maybe a toll. You never know. Oh, somebody brought this up. I forget where it was. Maybe it was on Twitter or maybe my patron Slack, but they were talking about Dune in terms of the Faceless Men. And George is obviously a big fan of Frank Herbert and Dune. And in that book series, there is this idea of characters that can be shielded from magic and prophecy in somehow. That is a plot point where there's a way to do it, where they can essentially be holes in the world of magic, where they can be disguised or just unable to be seen past. Maybe something kind of like you see in Watchmen, where Dr. Manhattan's ability to see the future is clouded by what's his name? God, I forget his name. I'm having a bad day with names. But a similar idea. Maybe that's something that the Faceless Men can do. Maybe that's part of Arya's training. That is also a major plot point in a lot of George's other stories. That Agon the Third in chat. Ozymandias or Ozymandias, whatever you want to call him. Vite. It's this idea that it's psychic users or magical users have these sort of like mental arm wrestling matches. It's very apparent in The Glass Flower, for instance. A major part of the game of minds is that the strong-minded, essentially the game of minds is you can swap body with somebody if you can take their body from them. Kind of like we saw with Varamir Sixskins and Thistle, or Bran and Hodor. And Varamir and all of his animals, where the ability of the psychic magical person is weighed against the other one. So the Faceless Men's abilities may be tied to their ability to resist other magic users. That they're like specifically trained to be anti those things. That Arya's ability to be a skin changer is a very valuable trait they would go after. Barrel Writer says the Face Dancers, I think they were called. Yeah, I've never read Dune, but I know that is a plot point. There's like specifically characters that are made in a way that are that are essentially created as weapons against major figures in Dune that are shielded from their magical abilities. So I would imagine that's what George's conception of the Faceless Men are, that their abilities are not their abilities are more in negating other magic users. Amanda says, sounds like the Game of Faces. Yeah, could be something like that. He loves, a lot of his stories are about characters using their psychic abilities to try and claim other bodies or overwhelm other people. The Pear-Shaped Man is actually one of his scariest stories, and it's a magical thriller psychic thing where you're actually seeing this person trying to claim another body, but you're seeing it from the perception of the victim, and you're only seeing the psychic person as he slowly starts to invade her mind, and eventually the swap is made, and it's absolutely horrifying. Which is super interesting, by the way, that when we see in A Song of Ice and Fire that he shows us the other way. He only really shows us the person trying to do the mind claiming, trying to win the game of minds or the game of faces from the perspective of the aggressor. But he has not shown us in A Song of Ice and Fire it happening from the perspective of the victim, which he has written before. So, something to think about. We'll just take a few more questions and then I'm gonna get out of here. We've been going for a little bit under 2 hours. So anything last, throw it in the chat. Try and rapid fire these out as my voice is going. And it actually snowed here today. So I gotta make sure my my garden's okay and get some stuff done outside. Lady Dillsdale earlier up in the chat, I think I called out her question. She said, the multiple coins things that Jack can give her a spare are the recruitment method. I don't think that, it doesn't seem like the Faceless Men are like Hogwarts, where they have lots and lots and lots of people that are trying to become Faceless Men, that it's like it's an academy. It seems more like a very small order that they are they recruit only the ones they want, rather than going for the other method, which is like what the Citadel does with their apprentices or their novices, where they let anybody join to be at the bottom level, but then they slowly whittle them away until you get up to the Archmaesters. It doesn't seem like the Faceless Men are doing that much at all. They're rather recruiting only the people they want, and they probably are pretty sure when they select them to become Faceless Men that they will succeed already. Lady Starfall asks, I wonder if the shade of evening helps with pain. It's a good question. It doesn't seem that way for when Aeron Greyjoy is forced to drink it. It seems to instead bring up all of his mental pain back, where he sees his dead brothers and he sees this horrible nightmare that perhaps Euron is projecting into his mind, but whatever it is, it doesn't seem fun. I don't think the people taking the shade of the evening are having a super great time while taking it. It's just sort of like connecting them to maybe like sort of like being awake while dreaming the whole time. Guilty Undertaker says, Arya seems to fail multiple times, yet she keeps getting promoted. Exactly. Where I think they expect their recruits to fail, and they put a lot of effort into training them. There's a lot of one-to-one time on them. She's not sitting in classes. She's not there's nothing like training methods that we see from what we're used to with these kind of organizations. It's more a direct apprenticeship than like a school sort of thing. Chris Fine says, do you see Braavos as being a force against oppressive monarchical structures in the world, though it's different factions? This is a good question about what is the point of the Faceless Men and Braavos against the rest of the world, because the Braavos does have its anti-slavery stance, and they refuse to be a part of that, but they still have gotten wealthy on trading, which means at some level, since most of the rest of Essos is pro-slavery, there are probably some interest in Braavos that are looking to move past that, essentially as a business strategy, that they would rather make coin than be pure to their roots, or the roots of the original members of Braavos. The Faceless Men, their stated goal was to destroy the Valyrians, but the Valyrians aren't really gone. Like, the Valyrian Empire is dead, but the world they created is not. The Valyrian daughters are still out there. All the colonies they made, like with Lys and Tyrosh, Myr, Volantis, what they did to Slaver's Bay, where they made Slaver's Bay by destroying the land from Old Gis and essentially making slavery the only way they could subsist. So it's kind of unclear. Maybe it's one of those things where are they just against oppressive powers, or are they against oppressive Valyrian powers? They took a contract from Euron Greyjoy to go kill Balon Greyjoy, and it's hard to see how you could square them being against oppressive evil in the world in general, and then also taking a job from Euron goddamn Greyjoy. It's one of those things that, unless it's serving some greater goal, it's hard to square those two ideas. Amanda was thinking about the Unsullied drink the other day. Yeah, they have a particular drink that like makes them feel numb to everything, kind of like being Faceless Men in a way. Okay, somebody was spamming stuff in chat. That was weird. People talking about other hallucinogens. Awesome. Maybe just one or two more, and then I'm gonna get out of here. Tolkis 420, do you think they're involved with the Tigers and Elephants? So those are the factions of Volantis, the Tigers versus the Elephants, sort of the peace and the war factions. I would bet that the Faceless Men, if they still are going against the Valyrian oppressiveness, they still are maybe trying to work against what remains of them, in particular Volantis. The Volantis, the Volantine slave trade, and they're I don't know if they're named the Pureborn, but the Valyrians that live behind the Black Walls are essentially one dragon away from bringing back the Valyrian Empire. So this actually ties into what is their relationship to Daenerys. I imagine they are watching very closely what she is doing and how she's using her dragons to think if they have to kill her and her dragons in order to make sure that the dragon fire and the fire and blood of the old freehold does not return to the rest of the world. And that's what I was talking about earlier, when like, would Arya be the one to kill Daenerys in the end if she starts going back towards empire building? That would be something that the Faceless Men would be very, very interested in. That is their stated goal for why they were started. They are very much against Dragon Lords. Although Dany's anti-slavery stance is probably confusing them, because they're like, well, she is conquering, but she's trying to end slavery wherever she goes, and she seems to be beloved, and she's not just using them the way that like Aegon the Conqueror did, or the Valyrians of old when they essentially raised the Rhoynar. So I imagine there's a lot of confusion within the Faceless Men order when they consider Daenerys's conquests and as she heads west. Aaron M with a super chat, $20, the $19.99, because for some reason I won't let her give 20. Thank you very much. She says, I don't have a question. Just promise me you use this money to buy some seeds. Thank you, another great Saturday stream. I have so many seeds. I have way more than I'll ever plant. I'm actually gonna go plant some after this. I have some flowers that I want to plant, some cosmos, some marigolds, and maybe some sunflowers, although I'm not sure if you can start those inside. Definitely go to maybe to gardening stuff. It's a lot more expensive hobby than I thought, although it will pay off once I have the once I have everything popping up. I'm actually gonna put a video up on Instagram in a little bit. Things have exploded in growth again overnight. Guilty Undertaker relances Black Walls, Harrenhal 2.0. Yeah, it seems very likely that Daenerys is going to Harrenhal Volantis on her way west. She just skipped it in the show, but their role as being a roadblock towards Westeros is not going to be undersold, including the fact that they sent a fleet of slaves directly at Slaver's Bay, but Benero of the Red Temple is preaching the otherwise, that Daenerys will save them. So that will definitely be something to look for. All right, so I think that's about it, everybody. Just quickly do some more, go back and do my plugs again. Obviously, like, share, subscribe, all the videos. Next video coming out will be about how Aegon the Sixth, or Fagon as he's known, will take Storm's End. Non-magical one, for once. Be working off Brendan Beefish's Blood of the Conqueror series she wrote a few years ago. I have a different take on the ending of it, which he has been pushing me for quite some time to actually put to paper. I think I'm going to do a Wednesday video game stream, Crusader Kings 2, probably House Dane. Also, if you want to support me in these trying times for everybody, you can go to patreon.com/JoeMagician. You can, at the $5 level, you get access to the patron only episodes, the patron Slack, as well as you get the videos, you get to listen to the videos a day early. At higher levels, you can actually watch them up to a day or two early. Let's see here. Social media, at the Joe Magician on Twitter, at Matt Wrote This on Instagram. I recently renamed my blog to joemagician.wordpress.com. I have to change all this for the videos. That was not great decision making on my part. I'll be back next Saturday. I'm gonna push it back to 2 p.m. to be nicer to West Coast people. Yeah. Also, Nessie just posted in chat the link to the Wit and Wisdom of Joe Magician. That's the podcast feed where if these are too long to watch, I put them out as audio only versions so you can listen to them. Guys, do me a favor. Go to iTunes, look it up, and if you could, give it a rating and a review. It would really help for getting viewership, or listeners on that stuff. iTunes cares very much about ratings and reviews. So I think that's all the things. Haven't planned the topic for next weekend. Maybe I'll have a guest back, we'll see. Anyway, thanks everybody. Hope you had a really good time. We add up to I think 150 people in here. Really great to see you all. Stay safe, stay inside, stay quarantined, and have a good weekend.